I take the same train every Friday night. 2114 from the Central Station, second carriage, window seat. It's a routine I never questioned until that night. I had drifted off shortly after departure, lulled by the steady rhythm of the tracks, the gentle sway of the car, the occasional flicker of overhead lights. The world outside had been familiar when I closed my eyes. The suburbs, the half-lit roads, the glow of petrol stations. When I opened them again, everything had changed. The train was slowing, not stopping entirely, but easing down like it was unsure about where it had arrived. I rubbed my eyes. Outside the window was fog, thick, heavy, almost alive. It coiled between narrow buildings I didn't recognize. The architecture was old, but not in a way I could place. Some windows were lit, casting warm amber rectangles onto the damp pavement. Others were dark, watching. The station platform was narrow, made of weathered bricks, with a single lamp flickering above a metal bench. A sign stood by the edge, but it was blank, just chipped white paint over rusted metal. No name, no direction. I turned to the other passengers, but something strange gripped my chest. No one else seemed to notice we were slowing down. A man across the aisle snored quietly, his head resting against the glass. A woman scrolled on her phone, oblivious. I stood, walked toward the door without deciding to. My body moved before my mind gave permission. When the doors hissed open, I stepped out. The fog swallowed me, and the train left without fanfare or delay. I turned back too late. The red taillights disappeared into the white void, and then it was just me, alone on a platform that shouldn't exist. I waited for a sound, an announcement, the hum of overhead wires, even a breeze. Nothing. Just the hush of something holding its breath. The town stretched ahead like it had been abandoned halfway through construction. Streets curved away from the station without clear pattern. Buildings leaned slightly inwards, as if listening. I walked. My footsteps echoed far louder than they should have. I passed a bakery. The display held bread that looked fresh, but no light was on inside. Further down, a newsstand displayed blank newspapers in metal racks. Every headline missing, every photo smudged to gray. I pulled out my phone. No bars, no Wi-Fi. The screen showed only a spinning circle where the map should have been. No time, no location, just a dark background and a blinking dot that never moved. The fog pressed in thicker as I turned a corner and saw a cafe. Its door was ajar, chairs neatly placed around small round tables. Steam curled from untouched cups. The warmth inside tempted me, but no one was there. No music, no voices. Only the smell of something sweet and distant, like burnt sugar and old paper. I called out. "Hello?" My voice sounded strange, muffled and slow, like it had to travel through water. I stepped inside, but it was like crossing into another scene altogether. The air was warmer, yes, but heavier too. Every step felt like it took effort. I sat at a table, waited. Nothing. Back outside, the fog had thickened, but not randomly. It seemed to part where I needed to go, closing behind me. I followed the path it allowed. I don't know why. The streets were like veins, twisting, silent, leading somewhere I didn't understand. I saw a cat watching from a windowsill, unmoving. A swing set in a park, swaying slowly even though there was no wind. Then I reached the center, a circular plaza with a statue in the middle. It was tall, featureless, just a humanoid form, arms extended, head tilted slightly upward. Around its base were plaques, but they were blank too. My reflection in the stone was faint, but I could see my eyes. They looked tired, older. Suddenly I heard it, a faint ticking, mechanical, rhythmic. It came from the north edge of the plaza. I followed the sound until I saw it, a tall clock tower. The hands on its face were stopped at exactly 12 minutes past midnight. I checked my phone again. The screen was dark. No time, no light. just the reflection of my face staring back. A staircase wound up inside the tower. I climbed, the wood creaking beneath each footstep. Dust floated in the air. At the top was a narrow room with windows overlooking the town. I saw it then, not just the fog, but the layout. The streets weren't random, they formed a pattern, a spiral. I was at the center. I sat on the floor, suddenly tired. A deep, bone-heavy exhaustion. I closed my eyes. When I opened them, I was on the train again. Same seat, same carriage, the rhythm of the tracks beneath me, the woman across the aisle still on her phone, the man still sleeping. I looked outside, the suburbs, the glow of a petrol station, normal, ordinary. I turned to the conductor as he passed. "Excuse me," I said, "what was the last stop?" He blinked. "We didn't stop, sir. Straight through tonight." I nodded, smiled politely, but when I looked down, the cuff of my pants was damp, and in my hand was a paper napkin I didn't remember picking up. It smelled like burnt sugar. That was last week. Since then, every time I ride the train, I watch the fog. It comes closer each night. I haven't told anyone, not because I'm afraid they won't believe me. I'm afraid they will. I'm not sure it was a dream, because I can't stop thinking about that statue, the blank plaque, the frozen tower, and the feeling that the city wasn't empty, that it was watching, waiting. If you're still here, then maybe something in the fog called to you too. There are more stories like this, more places that don't appear on maps, more nights where the train doesn't go where it should. And they're coming. So if you don't want to miss the next one, stay close, subscribe, and watch the fog. It always returns. The rain had stopped by the time the train broke down. It wasn't a violent halt, more of a soft surrender, the way old machines give up when they're tired of pretending to work. The conductor said there was an issue with the tracks up ahead, maybe a small landslide. We'd be delayed for a few hours. I didn't mind, I wasn't in a hurry. The station we stopped at was unmarked, no sign, no announcement, just a narrow platform surrounded by mist, and beyond that, the suggestion of a small town swallowed in trees. I was the only one who got off. There were no guards, no vendors, no sound at all except the quiet humming of the stalled train and the soft shuffle of my shoes on wet concrete. The road leading into town was crooked, the asphalt cracked, lined with tall black trees that leaned over as if listening. I followed it not out of curiosity, but because it felt like I was meant to. The buildings were old, wooden, some with shutters hanging loose. The town was gray in a way that didn't come from weather, but from something deeper, like the color had bled out long ago. There were no people, not a single one. I checked my phone, no signal. Tried to remember the name of the stop. There hadn't been one. I told myself I'd explore for 20 minutes, maybe take a photo or two and return to the train. But I didn't take any photos. Something about the place didn't want to be captured. I found the cemetery at the edge of town. It sat behind a rusted iron gate, partially open. The gate creaked as I touched it, not loud, just enough to feel noticed. The grass was damp, the path between the graves was narrow and winding. Some headstones were so weathered that the names were almost gone. Others looked fresh, too fresh, like someone still visited, though I hadn't seen a single soul. Then I saw it. I stopped breathing. It was just a headstone like the others, polished, clean, but the name, my name, was carved into it. Full name, middle initial, the exact way I sign it, and below the date of death. Tomorrow. I must have stood there for 5, maybe 10 minutes. The wind didn't blow, the trees didn't move, the whole world held its breath with me. I told myself there had to be an explanation, a coincidence, a sick joke, but inside I knew. Something about that place had always known I was coming. I stepped back. The path behind me looked unfamiliar now. The mist had thickened, and the gate was no longer visible. I turned in a slow circle, expecting someone, anything, to appear. But there was nothing. Just that headstone. Just my name. I whispered it aloud. It sounded strange, like I was calling to someone who wasn't me. I walked back toward town. The buildings looked different now, their windows darker, their doors slightly open. I hurried my pace. I no longer wanted to be seen. The train was still there when I returned, but it was dark inside. No lights, no voices, no movement. I stepped onto the platform, and then I noticed. The train wasn't just empty, it was dusted with fine gray ash, like it had been sitting for years. I didn't understand. My mind tried to piece it together, tried to scream logic into the silence, but the silence didn't care. I sat down on the same bench I had left an hour ago. I waited. Eventually, I stood again and walked back through the town, this time moving faster. I didn't look into the windows. I didn't try to explain anything to myself. I went straight back to the cemetery. The headstone was still there, but now the date had changed. Today. I ran. The trees didn't move, the wind didn't blow, but something followed, not footsteps, just the sense of being remembered. I ran through empty streets, past homes that had never been lived in, past shops with dust in the windows, past my reflection in the glass, though I swear I didn't move when it did. I found the road again, but there was no train, no station, just silence. I kept walking. I don't know for how long. The town never really ended. It just became more trees. And eventually I found a sign, a small wooden marker nailed to a crooked pole. No name, just a symbol. Infine. Since then I've tried to find it on a map. Nothing. I've searched records. I've asked in forums. I've traced old rail lines. Nothing. But I know what I saw. I know what saw me. And when I close my eyes now, I don't see dreams. I see graves. I see my name. I think I never really left. I think that town took something and left something behind in me. Some stories don't end. They just wait. If this one found you, the next will too. Subscribe to WhisperTales and listen carefully next time. I first became aware of the lamp's presence 6 days after it somehow appeared in my apartment. I opened the door that morning with the weight of an ordinary routine. Coffee in hand, briefcase under my arm, only to be stopped cold by a soft, amber glow spilling beneath the threshold. My heart stuttered. The air felt different somehow, as if charged with the hush of a crowded cathedral. I set down the coffee, wiped my palms on my trousers and slipped inside. There it was. A delicate brass table lamp, the shade a muted beige, perched upon a small wooden side table that I had moved just 2 days earlier. I would have remembered placing it there. I never bought such a lamp, nor recalled borrowing one. Curious. Its pull chain swung gently, brushing the table's surface. I reached out and tickled the chain with the fingertip. It jingled like distant laughter. The shade's fabric was slightly creased at the edge, as though aged by years of heat. I ran my hand along the brass base. It was smooth, cool to the touch, but I felt in its weight the remainder of a lost memory. For a moment I wondered if I was still dreaming. I unplugged the lamp without second thought. It blinked off, but the faint amber glow lingered at the edges of my vision. I stared at the empty socket, the cord trailing to the wall outlet, and felt a hollow ache in my chest. That night I slept poorly, my dreams a diffuse haze. Dream 1. I stood in a narrow hallway lit by dozens of identical lamps, each casting a warm yellow halo on peeling wallpaper. The walls curved inward, guiding me toward a single lamp set apart on a small table beneath a curtained window. Its shade bore a tiny tear at the seam, like a teardrop frozen in fabric. I knelt and whispered its name, Marjorie. A hush answered me. Then a door at the end of the hall creaked open and I stepped through. Beyond lay a dimly lit room I had never seen but somehow knew by heart. An armchair stood beside the lamp. In it sat an old woman whose face was veiled in shadow. I could feel her watching me, patient and expectant. I woke, panting. The lamp on my own table was dark. I lay in bed, silent, tracing the dream's outline with my fingertips. Its warmth felt real. Over the next days, my waking hours fractured into two worlds, one of practical tasks, emails, grocery runs, laundry, and one of the lamp. I sketched it on coffee-stained napkins, the contour of its base, the twist of its chain, the soft flare of the shade. Each sketch shaped the lamp into something more than artifice, a vessel. I showed one drawing to my friend Lynn. "It's beautiful," she said, sipping green tea. "Looks antique." I laughed, but my hand shook. "I never bought it," I admitted. Her brow furrowed. That evening, I made a dream journal. I placed it on my bedside table, beside a pen dipped in deep blue ink. When I awoke, I scrawled every detail I could recall. The tear in the shade, the hush in the hallway, the way the woman's breath sounded. Sometimes I added question marks, moments I only half remembered, like the smell of lilac and old paper. Dream 2. The lamp was on a small desk, cluttered with yellowed letters and faded photographs. I sat in the armchair, reading one letter. The script looped elegantly, addressed to someone named Marjorie E. Willen. A date, 1947, glowed at the top. I looked up to find the old woman leaning over my shoulder, her eyes bright with sorrow. She placed her hand atop mine and squeezed gently. The room pulsed, the walls shifting like pages in a book. I tried to speak, but found no words. Then the lamp's chain jingled, and everything collapsed into darkness. I woke with a start. My pen lay across the dream journal, ink blotting the page. I leaned forward, heart hammering, and pressed my palm onto the blot. The stain felt warm, as though imprinting itself onto my skin. Compelled by a sudden certainty, I went online and searched Marjorie E. Willen, 1947. The results were silence. No records, no genealogy entries, no birth certificates, no obituary. It was as if she had never existed. My chest tightened. I closed my laptop and stared at the lamp's unlit form across the room. It seemed to pulse in time with my heartbeat. I spent the following afternoon at the public library, scouring microfilm archives of local newspapers. By the time my eyes stung from the flickering reels, I had found a single birth announcement. Marjorie Ellen Willen, born 1928, Hotham County. Then a caretaker's registry. Marjorie E. Willen, caretaker, Willoughby Estate, 1946 to 1978. And then nothing. Her name vanished after 1978. No marriage record, no death notice, only a blank page, as though someone had torn her life from the ledger. I photocopied the entries, hands trembling. As I left, the librarian eyed me curiously. I smiled and slipped out into the rain. Dream 3. The Willoughby estate loomed before me, its stone walls cold and silent. Ivy crept across the facade like skeletal fingers. I stepped inside. The oak doors groaned. Dust motes drifted in the air. The caretaker's room was just as I dreamed. Lilac wallpaper peeling in places, a window blocked by tattered drapes, and the lamp, exactly as in my apartment. That morning, I packed a small bag and drove to the ruins of the Willoughby estate. I stood before a boarded-up entrance, heart hammering. With shaking fingers, I pried open a sagging window and climbed through. Inside, the corridors were choked with dust and silence. Footsteps echoed. I followed a dim shaft of light to a door marked "Caretaker." I pushed it open. The room was empty except for the socket on the wall where the lamp must have been. I pressed my hand to the spot. The plaster was cool and pitted. A soft jingling behind me made me spin. There she stood, Marjorie, as clear as in my dreams, her hair silver, eyes bright with gentle authority. She wore the same simple dress, faded but neat. "You came," she said. Her voice was the hush of pages turning. "I needed to remember," I whispered. "You remember everything now," she replied. "The lives I held here, the stories I kept alive through this lamp, but someone must carry them forward." My throat tightened. "Why me?" She stepped closer, the light around her shimmering. "Because you listen." I thought of the nights scribbling in my journal, the hours spent tracing her life through faded documents. I felt her gratitude in the marrow of my bones. I nodded. She placed her hand on my shoulder, warm as a living thing. "Then will you take the lamp?" I swallowed. "Yes." She smiled, a slow curve of release. "Thank you, child." And with that, she faded, leaving only the quiet hum of memory. I carried the lamp back through the overgrown corridors, down the cracked steps, and into my car. It fit in my arms as if it belonged. Back in my apartment, I set it on the table and plugged it in. It glowed immediately, the tear in the shade visible now in plain relief. I reached out and felt the warmth seep into my fingertips. That night, I dreamed of Marjorie as a child, her laughter echoing through a sunny garden. I dreamed of the estate's grand halls, the servants' whispers, the storms that rattled the windows. Each dream was a gift. I woke and wrote them down, filling notebook after notebook. In the weeks since, the lamp has become my constant companion. It lights my readings, my writing, my quiet evenings alone. Sometimes I feel its glow change, warmer when I sleep, but cooler when I'm awake. Sometimes I catch a glimmer of movement in its reflection, as though someone stands behind me in the glass. Yesterday, Lynn came over and asked why I had stacks of journals and microfilm printouts littering the floor. I simply said, "I'm telling someone." I no longer fear the dreams. I welcome them. Each dawn I reach for my journal and write the next chapter. The lamp glows softly beside me, its chain occasionally jingling as if applauding. One day, I will pass the lamp on. When I feel its warmth slip from my fingertips, I will know another listener awaits. Until then, I am its keeper, guardian of Marjorie's stories, custodian of memories no one else can hold. Because in the end, memory is not just mine or hers, it belongs to anyone who remembers. And as long as the lamp burns, those stories will live on. If the glow of this story stirred something in your heart, please tap like and subscribe to WhisperTales for more slow-burning mysteries. Hit the bell so you never miss a whisper of forgotten memories. Tell me in the comments, what secret memory would you chase if a lamp could reveal it?
It began as an unremarkable evening. The clock on my bedside table chimed 10 times. My tea was gone cold, and the soft hum of the street lamp outside lulled me into a sense of calm. I settled beneath my quilt and closed my eyes. the day's worries drifting away like fading mist. Yet in that quiet, a voice stirred somewhere beneath the planks of my bedroom floorboards. So faint, I thought I imagined it at first. I shifted, pulling the covers tighter, then exhaled slowly as the sound receded into silence. Night after night, the same gentle susurration returned, teasing the edge of perception as though the darkness itself were coaxing me to listen deeper. At first, I chalked it up to my restless imagination, the creaks and groans of an old house settling under the moon. But then, the voice began to speak. It spoke in a tone devoid of flesh and bone, a timbre as smooth as polished stone, yet fractured by something ancient and unknowable. A single word, repeated in a slow, deliberate cadence. Wondering. Wanting. Waiting. I told myself it was the wind. I told myself I was tired. But each time my head hit the pillow, I felt its presence coil beneath the bed frame like a living thing, coaxing me to lean in closer, to believe in its existence. Listen. The first time I heard it clearly, I froze. The whisper had slipped through the floorboards, curling around my ankles like a wisp of smoke. My heart hammered in my chest as I stared at the dark hollow between the mattress and the floor, half expecting, hoping, to glimpse something solid, to dispel the fear. But there was nothing. Only the echo of that single, fractured utterance lingering in the air. Each night the anomaly deepened. Objects shifted on their own. My glasses turned face down beside my book, a single sock draped over the footboard, the lamp's shade tilted as though nudged by invisible fingers. My dreams grew restless, dappled with unnameable shapes, voices calling from the darkness, light sputtering at the edge of awareness. I began leaving candles burning, their flickering halos chasing away the shadows, but the voice was impervious. It thrived in the places light could not reach. I confessed my fears to no one. Who would believe me? The rational modern mind? I was alone with this spectral whisperer, responsible for its mounting power. As the nights wore on, the voice changed its refrain, shifting from a single word to fragments of sentences. Why won't you see me? I've been here. Don't leave me alone. Each phrase was delivered in that hollow, resonant tone, closer now, seeping through the board cracks to caress my ankles with a promise of revelation or ruin. My waking hours blurred into the nights. I found myself drawn to the bed's edge at odd moments, heart thudding as I knelt to peer beneath the frame. I reached out a trembling hand, desperate for proof, and felt only cold floorboards. Yet the second my palm touched wood, I heard it again. A whisper, directly in my ear, as though the voice had risen up from the shadows. I recoiled, scrambling back into bed, my pulse raging. In the days that followed, the presence grew bolder. The voice no longer waited for darkness. It murmured at all hours, a low vibration beneath the surface of normalcy. I would be working at my desk when I'd catch it, drifting through the floor, prompting me to stop and listen. I nearly dropped my mug once when it breathed out my name, as though it had stood behind me, watching me in the daylight. I became obsessed with discovering its origin. I probed every inch of the room, tapping the boards, checking for loose planks, even crawling under the bed with a flashlight. Nothing. The space was empty, save for dust bunnies and the faint outline of where my husband's old hockey stick used to rest. Still, the voice thrived. It thrived on uncertainty, feeding on my need for answers. Then came the crescendo. One night, the whispers roared in my mind, echoing so loud I thought my skull would shatter. I clutched at the quilt, my teeth chattering as it spoke, not in fragments but in full sentences. I am here. You belong to me. The words reverberated beneath the boards, through my bones, until I felt as though I were dissolving into the floor itself. In a panic, I yanked the quilt aside and slid from the bed, standing on the floorboards with bare feet. The room was cold. The candle flames stretched upward like pleading hands. I dropped to my knees and stared into the shadowed void beneath the slats. There it was, or rather, beyond where it should have been, the pure absence of form. A gulf so dark, it devoured the feeble glow from above. For a heartbeat, I thought I sensed movement, the subtlest ripple in the shadow. I leaned closer, curiosity and terror warring in my chest, and that's when I felt it, the soft brush of breath against my wrist. I jerked back, stumbling into the bed. Silence followed, absolute, oppressive. The next moment, my phone pinged with a message, though I'd left it in the kitchen. My chest tightened. It felt wrong, as though the house itself had shifted. I fled the room, leaving the door ajar and the candle guttering behind me. I spent the rest of the night on the couch, watching the living room walls with bleary eyes, listening for any hint of its return. But morning came, pale and unassuming. Sunlight slipped through the curtains, dissipating the shadows as though they were nothing more than a bad dream. Now I stand at the edge of that bed each night, torch in hand, willing myself to confront the unseen. I know it waits beneath, patient and patient, because the emptiness calls to me as much as it calls to you right now. I can feel it, coaxing you to lean in closer, to believe. But take heed. Some whispers are meant to haunt you until you shatter, and some presences never let you go. And as you settle in tonight, remember, under your bed, in the silent dark, a faceless voice may already be beckoning. And so, as the last echo of that single word faded into the darkness beneath my bed, I lay there wondering if, or when, it would return. But if you felt that chill run down your spine, you're not alone. Tap the like button to let me know you're still with me, and subscribe so you never miss the next whisper lurking just beyond the light. Sweet dreams, if you can. The tape wasn't mine. It was just there one morning, sitting next to the old VCR like it belonged. I hadn't used that machine in years. I wasn't even sure it still worked. But the tape was already inside. Half pushed in, the label was blank. Just a strip of pale, sun-warped adhesive where something had once been written and later scraped off. I remember standing there for a while, just staring at it, curious. Not frightened exactly, not yet, just puzzled. It looked familiar in the way old things do, as though it had always been part of the room and I'd only just noticed. The house was silent, the kind of deep silence that only exists in the early hours, when even the birds haven't decided whether to wake yet. Outside, the sky was a kind of soft blue-gray, and mist clung to the grass. The air felt like it hadn't moved all night. I pressed the tape in. The VCR responded with a soft mechanical click, the kind I'd almost forgotten, but which came back with perfect clarity. The television screen flashed to life, blooming in blue, then settling into a field of static. White noise buzzed low and constant, like a whisper behind a wall. And then, without me pressing play, the tape began. At first, it was nothing, or what seemed like nothing. A shaky camcorder shot of a street I didn't recognize. The footage was grainy, bleached out at the edges, flickering with small lines that ran vertically like rain. But the longer I watched, the more it felt like I should know this place. A stop sign bent slightly forward. A mailbox with peeling paint. A cul-de-sac framed by two identical white houses with shutters like half-closed eyes. And something about the light. Wrong in that particular way home videos used to be. Everything dim, washed in pale amber, like the world had been filmed through memory instead of glass. Then the tape cut, hard. A quick burst of static, a sharp whew, and the scene changed. Now it was a room, small, windowless, with a single metal table and a tape recorder on top. The camera didn't move. It just stared, like whoever was holding it had set it down. And then, a voice. "If you're hearing this, you've already started." It was a man's voice, but thin and distant, like it was being played from inside a drain. "Don't rewind. Don't pause. Don't stop. You need to see it through." I reached for the remote, just instinct. But the buttons didn't work. Pause, stop, even eject, nothing responded. The tape moved on, more static. Then a forest trail. The camera wobbling, tilting too fast, catching glimpses of trees that all looked the same. Birch, I think. Tall, white, silent. There was no sound but the low hum of the tape itself and the distant rustle of leaves. Or maybe static again. It was hard to tell where the footage ended and the noise began. There was a flash of movement on the left edge of the screen. A shadow stepping out of view. Not fast, not hiding exactly, just passing. And again the voice. "If you see her, do not follow." Who? "She will look like someone you lost. She will remember your name." I felt a cold flicker in my stomach, the kind that only comes when something skips past fear and lands in the space between familiarity and dread. I should have turned it off. I should have unplugged the whole setup and thrown the tape out. But I didn't. That night, I dreamed about the street, the same one from the tape. I walked it in slow motion, hearing the crunch of gravel beneath my shoes, smelling something old and dusty in the air, like an attic after rain. A dog barked once, far away, then fell silent. The mailboxes had no names. The houses had no windows. Only black squares where glass should have been. I woke up at 3:16 a.m. My TV was on, screen glowing blue. The VCR was humming. The tape was rewound. I didn't remember pressing anything. I sat there staring at the screen until the hum grew louder, louder than it should have. It was like it was building towards something, like an engine revving softly under breath. Then it played again, on its own. This time, the forest was darker. The trees were closer. There were markings now, carved into bark, spirals, scratched numbers, a crude drawing of an eye. The camera lingered longer between each cut. It was guiding me, frame by frame, toward something I hadn't agreed to see. Then a voice whispered, not the same one. Feminine, barely audible. "You're closer now." The next day, the tape was gone. The VCR was empty. I searched the room, moved furniture, even checked outside in case I had done something in my sleep. Nothing. No tape, no case, no label. Only a faint smell, like warm plastic and ash. I tried convincing myself it had been a dream, that maybe the whole thing had never happened. But that night, the dream returned. Not the forest this time. The room, The metal table, the tape recorder, the voice. Don't stop watching. I haven't told anyone. Who would believe it? But here's the thing. I found a second tape. No label, just a pale square of adhesive, waiting. I should have destroyed the second tape. Instead, I stared at it on my kitchen table for hours. Same blank label, same faint scent of scorched dust. My hands hovered over it like it might move on its own. By evening, I gave in. It slid into the VCR like it belonged there. No static this time, just darkness and the sound of breathing, faint, wet, almost too close to the mic. Then, an image flickered into focus. It was my hallway. Not a hallway like mine, it was mine. Same scuffed trim, same coat hook that always tilted slightly right. The camera stood still, staring toward my bedroom door. I waited for it to change. I waited for me to walk past, or some movement in the shadows. Nothing happened. But the longer I watched, the more the image began to distort. Not in a glitchy way, no flickers or jumps, but slowly, almost imperceptibly. The shadows deepened, the paint grew dull, the air seemed heavier. And then I noticed something behind the door, a shape, just barely, pressed against the crack between wood and frame, not peeking, not moving, just there, waiting. The voice came back. "You've brought it home." That night, my dreams were worse. Not dreams, exactly, more like memories turned inside out. I was a child again, sitting in my grandparents' basement. The old TV buzzed in the corner, its blue glow casting long shadows over the floor. I could hear voices, distant and low, but couldn't make out words. Every time I turned toward them, they shifted, slipping behind my ears. Then the static began to whisper. It spoke in my voice, or a version of it, slower, worn. "You left us behind." I woke up gasping, my hands gripping the sides of the mattress. The VCR was on, the tape was playing, but the TV was off. Only sound, a loop of soft footsteps and something dragging across the floor. In the days that followed, I started noticing breaks in time, in sound, in reality. Sometimes I'd walk into a room and hear the last half second of something. A voice cut short, a door just finishing its close, though I knew I was alone. The clocks fell out of sync. The microwave always read 3:16, no matter how many times I reset it. Worst of all were the mirrors. Every reflection was just a little wrong. Not completely, just slightly delayed, or slower, or off. Once, brushing my teeth, I caught my reflection watching me after I turned away. Just for a breath. But long enough. I thought I could end it. I thought if I stopped watching, it would fade. I unplugged everything. VCR, TV, even the lamps. But that night, the third tape arrived. No sound, no knock, just sitting on my bed when I came home from work. A small, pale rectangle. Blank label. Still warm. I threw it in the garbage, walked 5 blocks, and dropped it in the bin behind the gas station. The next morning, it was back, on the kitchen counter, facing me. This time, I didn't even fight it. I pressed play. The image showed a field I'd never seen before, or at least I thought I hadn't. Grass bent in a wind I couldn't hear. A single figure stood in the distance, facing away from the camera. It was hard to tell, but they looked like me. Same slouch, same jacket, same slow turn of the head. When the figure turned fully toward the camera, it revealed a face blurred beyond recognition. Not pixelated, not glitched, just smoothed out, like an unfinished mask. And it raised its hand, slowly, deliberately. It pointed, behind me. I turned. Nothing. But the air had changed. Thick, charged, curious. The screen went black. The last tape. And I say last only because I've run out of time, not because the tapes have stopped. Began 2 nights ago. It didn't show images anymore. Only sounds, echoes, snippets of laughter, old songs warped and slowed, my own voice reading things I never remembered writing, and over it all, the woman's whisper. You saw too much. You kept watching. You made it real. Now the tapes don't need a machine. They play in my head, behind my eyes, in the hum of the refrigerator, in the pause between breaths. When I blink, I see new frames. When I sleep, I forget which part is memory. And when I wake, the room is just slightly different. The corners stretch a little too far. The light bends around nothing. My reflection is patient, and I can hear the next tape clicking in, ready, waiting. If the tape spoke to you, leave something behind. A like, a whisper, a trace that you were here. There are more stories waiting, and they remember who listens. Subscribe before the next one finds you.
I first saw the mirror on a gray Tuesday afternoon. My apartment was quiet, too quiet, save for the distant hum of traffic on the street below and the soft ticking of the clock on the mantel. I just returned from work, shoulders heavy with the weight of another day I barely remembered living. My eyes caught something out of the corner of my vision. The tall, ornate mirror standing in the corner of the living room, its silver frame tarnished and intricate, swirling with floral motifs and curling vines. I hadn't owned such a piece. I didn't recall ever seeing it. For a moment, I wondered if I'd imagined it. But there it was, leaning against the wall, its reflective surface catching the pale light of the overcast sky. Curious, I approached. My reflection shimmered, slender, pale with dark circles beneath my eyes. As I drew closer, I felt a faint vibration in the air, like a sigh pushed through the glass. I lifted a trembling hand to the mirror's surface. My fingertips brushed the cold glass. And then I heard it, a whisper, so faint I almost dismissed it as the wind outside. Yet the sound was distinct. My name, Emily. I froze, my breath caught. No one else lived with me. My phone lay on the sofa, silent. I stepped back and blinked, certain I'd heard wrong. Silence. But the mirror remained. Its glass rippled, reflecting not just my image, but a dim hallway illuminated by flickering sconces, one I did not recognize. Intrigued, I reached out again. Come closer. My heart hammered. Who's there? I whispered, voice quivering. Only my own reflection stared back, lips moving soundlessly. I backed away. The soft echo of a sigh reverberated around the room. That night, I dreamed. In the dream, I stood at the end of a hallway lined with mirrors on either side. Each mirror was framed in the same twisting silver vines. The floor was marble, smooth and cold under bare feet. A row of brass sconces cast golden light, and at the far end, a larger mirror, more ornate than the rest, beckoned me. I walked slowly, each step echoing. I passed my reflection a dozen times, each version more worn, older, until finally I reached the grand mirror. Its glass shimmered like liquid metal. I leaned toward it. Then I heard the whisper, Emily. I reached out. My hand passed through the glass as if it were water. I gasped, falling forward into the mirror's surface, plunging into darkness. I woke in my bed, drenched in sweat, heart racing. Morning light filtered through the curtains, gentle and pale. The mirror was gone. Relief washed over me until I noticed the hallway behind me was no longer empty. A reflection stood in the glass panel of my apartment door, a tall shape, head tilted slightly. But when I turned, nobody was there. My pulse thudded in my ears. Over the next days, the mirror returned each time I looked away, in the bedroom corner, propped beside the bookshelf, even hidden behind the couch, always at the edge of my vision, always whispering. One evening, after a sleepless day, I perched on the edge of the sofa and stared at its glossy surface. I lit a candle and placed it before the glass. The flame trembled, casting flickering shadows. A soft hum filled the room, as if the mirror itself breathed. Remember. Remember what? I cried. Only silence answered. But then I saw movement behind the glass. Shapes shifting, furniture, a door opening, a gloved hand placing an object on a table. I leaned closer until my forehead touched the glass. Through the mirror, I saw a living room from another age, polished wood floors, lace curtains fluttering at the window, a delicate music box on a side table. I heard a faint melody, old and haunting, yet achingly familiar. In the reflection, I saw someone too, but only the silhouette of a woman, hair pinned up, wearing a dress with a high collar. She turned, but her face stayed hidden in shadow. She raised the music box's lid. A soft tune spiraled through the air. Listen. I closed my eyes, letting the melody seep into my mind. It felt like home. When I opened my eyes, the mirror stood silent and dark. The candle had gutted out. My heart ached with longing I could not name. I scoured my apartment for clues. Old photographs, letters from my grandmother's attic, dusty journals in the closet. None held the melody or the image I'd seen. I researched antique music boxes, combed online archives. I discovered a firm in Paris that made hand-cranked boxes in the 1920s, their finest models adorned with silver floral motifs. My reflection in the mirror seemed to nod at this discovery. That night, I dreamt again, Dream 3. I stood in an elegant parlor, walls wallpapered in pale blue and gold. A piano sat in the corner. The woman from before stood by the fireplace, her silhouette bright in the hearth's glow. She beckoned me forward. On the mantelpiece, a mirror identical to mine glowed softly. I crossed the room, each step muffled by a plush rug. The woman reached into her dress pocket and produced a key. She handed it to me. "Unlock me," she whispered. I took the key with shaking fingers. She smiled, and the dream dissolved. I woke to find the key in my hand, small, iron with an intricate bow of swirling vines. My heartbeat thundered. I stared at the blank air. A pang of wonder and fear seized me. I knew, without thinking, I must find the lock. The next day, I visited an antiques dealer downtown. The shop smelled of old wood and lavender. I set the key on the counter. "Where do you keep your mirrors?" I asked softly. The dealer's eyes widened as he recognized the key. He led me to a dusty back room filled with mirrors of every shape. Each mirror bore a slot near its frame. Only one slot matched, a small keyhole at the bottom corner of a tall, tarnished mirror. I inserted the key. It turned with a click. The glass rippled and the room shifted. I saw my own apartment behind me, but blurred. Then the reflection vanished, replaced by the elegant parlor of my dream. I felt a pull, a lure of stolen time. I yanked the key free, the mirror stilled, showing only my anxious reflection. I left the shop with the key and the heavy mirror in tow. By candlelight that night, I locked and unlocked our 2 mirrors in sequence, my apartments and the dealer's, until I lost count. Each time a new scene unfolded, a child chasing fireflies in a moonlit garden, a gala where masked figures danced beneath crystal chandeliers, a lonely woman sewing in a sunlit bedroom. All scenes accompanied by whispers, names, memories, hints of stories unfinished. By dawn, I was trembling. My own reflection stared back, hollow-eyed. I realized the mirror was not just a window, it was a vessel for lives forgotten. I returned to my apartment, weighed down by every vision I had collected. The mirror sat silently in its corner, unassuming yet brimming with untold lives. My journals lay open on the table, pages filled with ink, but each word felt too small for the enormity of what I must record. That evening, I placed a pressed violet from my grandmother's garden before the glass. As its deep purple petals brushed the mirror's edge, the surface shimmered. A new scene unfolded. A moonlit courtyard in spring bloom. Statues of angels stood watch as fountains murmured. A young man knelt before a marble bench, carving a name into its surface. Elodie. He paused, tears glistening on his cheeks, and traced the letters with a trembling finger. He whispered her name, and I heard the mirror echo. Elodie. I leaned forward as the man rose, clutching a single white rose. He walked toward a door framed by ivy, the petals falling at each step. He paused at the threshold, hesitated, then placed the rose on the doorstep. The door creaked open, revealing a grand hall lit by torchlight. Soft music drifted, strings and flute, melancholy yet sweet. The man stepped inside, and the mirror zoomed in on his face. Hopeful, haunted, heartbroken. He reached the center of the hall and found a figure, cloaked in white, holding a lantern. She turned, and I gasped. The silhouette of Elodie. Hair loose around her shoulders, eyes bright with recognition. They reached for each other, only to be separated by an invisible veil. He banged on the air, desperate, and the glass rippled, returning me to my apartment. I sank to the floor, notebook in hand, fingers slick with tears. Elodie and her lover's story pressed on me like a heartbeat. I wrote, "He carved her name in stone, so she would never be forgotten, even if he could not reach her again." That night, I dreamed once more. This time I wandered the spring courtyard, petals drifting around me. The man approached, his eyes meeting mine. He opened his mouth, but no sound emerged from my lips. Instead, his whisper filled the air. "Remember us." I nodded, tears falling into the grass. He reached out, touched my palm, and I felt the warmth of his memory join mine. Over the next weeks, the mirror became a conduit, not only for distant lives, but for my own. I placed tokens of my past, a ticket to my first concert, a fragment of my childhood drawing, a lock of my childhood cat's fur. Each token summoned a reflection. At the concert ticket, I heard the roar of a crowd and saw myself, younger, dancing under strobe lights with friends long gone. The drawing triggered a scene in a sunlit studio where my mother guided my hand as we painted together. The cat's fur brought the soft purring of a familiar companion curled on my lap, and the mirror whispered my name with gentle recognition. "We remember you." I realized then that the mirror did not demand sacrifice of my life, but an offering of memory, both theirs and mine, woven together in a tapestry of echoes. One night, The mirror's glass trembled and formed letters across its surface. The keeper may rest when all stories are told, but the stories never end. I traced the words, feeling the weight of my promise. Soft tears slid down my cheeks as I whispered, "I will remember." In the final sequence, I arranged the artifacts around the mirror in a circle. The violet, the locket, the rose, the ticket, the drawing, the cat's fur. The mirror glows softly, colors swirling beneath its silver surface. I step back and watch as each memory dances across the glass in delicate vignettes. Elodie's courtyard, the music box's tune, my mother's laughter, the beat of the concert, the warmth of the cat.
"Thank you," I murmur, voice steady.
The mirror's reflection fades to show only my own face, serene and resolute. I gather my notebooks and close them gently. The room is quiet save for the soft hum of the mirror's glow. As dawn breaks, I light a final candle and address the mirror directly. Our stories live on, held here in glass and light, and so shall our memories, whispered into eternity. With that, I leave the room, closing the door behind me. The mirror stands silent, its silver vines curled protectively around worlds, seen and unseen. If this tale awakened your curiosity, please hit like and subscribe to WhisperTales. Stay with us, and we'll uncover countless more forgotten memories together. Click the bell so you never miss a whisper, and remember every story while it still echoes.
I lay restless in my familiar apartment, the hum of the city lulling me into a half-sleep, my clock face glowing 2:12 a.m. as silence settled around me. At 2:13 a.m., a faint whisper drifted from the hallway, perhaps the wind but distinctly human, a voice so close yet impossibly distant, stirring a cold dread within me. I held my breath, straining to catch the words lost to darkness. Each inhalation trembling, the hush around me stretching taut like a held breath before a storm. My phone lay on the bedside table, its screen dark but for a single notification icon. Yet no alert had arrived, and the silence felt deliberate, almost watchful. I rose slowly, every movement heavy, leaves of memory rustling in my mind with childhood echoes of unseen presences lurking just beyond sight. The hallway was empty, the once familiar corridor now cast in unsettling shadows, walls seeming to pulse with silent whispers that I could almost hear. A door at the far end groaned open, though no breeze stirred. Its movement was measured, deliberate, as if guided by an unseen hand beckoning me closer. My reflection shimmered in the glass door, distorted and pale, and I could have sworn my eyes traced a movement behind me. Yet nothing was there. A low, sorrowful sigh escaped from within the apartment, the air growing thick and humid, pressing in on me like the thin walls of a coffin. I stepped back, my pulse thrumming, but something urged me forward. A pull as intangible as the midnight breeze that seemed to carry voices just out of reach. I pressed close to the cracked door, the narrow gap revealing only shadows dancing against a flickering hall light, my heart striking unforgettable notes of fear. My hand, gloved in sweat, clasped the cold knob, each subtle rotation sending tremors up my arm as the air thickened with unspoken warnings. A muffled sob resonated from the dark interior, raw and mournful, wrapping around my senses like an icy chain tightening its grip. I opened the door an inch, the sliver of darkness stretching into eternity, revealing nothing but the empty room and the weight of absence pressing in. At that moment, a breath brushed against my neck, soft and chilling, as though someone ghosted past me an instant before I could turn. I spun around, eyes wide, whispering my own name. Yet the corridor remained still, save for the distant hum of distant traffic. My reflection in the window rippled unnaturally, and I saw more than my face. Something behind me, vanishing when I dared to look directly. Panic bloomed in my chest, heart pounding, but my legs carried me onward, driven by a need to confront the source of these vanished voices. Each step echoed through the hollow flat, and the walls seemed to recede into darkness, swallowing the path forward in silent black. In the living room, the pale glow of my old fireplace flickered out of sync, its embers whispering secrets I couldn't quite decipher. The floorboards creaked beneath my weight, as if the very wood murmured warnings, each step a soft confession of the apartment's hidden sorrow. A sudden chill enveloped me, the air swirling with unseen currents, carrying fragments of distant laughter that felt both familiar and horribly alien. I paused by the window, staring out at a silent cityscape, the streetlights flickering in unison as though dancing to a dying heartbeat I couldn't escape. Behind me, a soft scraping sound traced the wall's surface, slow and deliberate, like fingernails brushing cold plaster in a desperate plea. My breath hitched as the room's shadows thickened, each corner pooling into deeper darkness, swallowing any trace of certainty I once held. A distant melody drifted through the flat, each note fraying at the edges, as if played on an old piano with broken strings. I followed the sound, fingertips grazing the wallpaper, its pattern warping under my touch as if alive, pulsing with unseen life. A soft sobbing met me at the threshold of the kitchen, the sink faucet dripping in irregular rhythm, each drop echoing like a heartbeat. I blinked, and the faucet stopped, replaced by a single, sharp intake of breath from the opposite corner, unseen but undeniably there. My own reflection stared back, lips moving in silent prayer. Yet I was alone. Alone with voices that vanished the moment I sought their source. A faint flicker of movement among the dying embers caught my eye, each glowing spark dancing like embattled fireflies trapped in a midnight trance. The piano's broken melody returned for a heartbeat, its notes lingering between walls, each chord unraveling the threads of my fragile resolve. A soft thud echoed from above, the ceiling settling or something pacing overhead, its weight shifting the very air with heavy uncertainty. My vision blurred as dust motes swirled, revealing silhouettes etched into wallpaper, faces screaming silently behind faded floral patterns. A muted cry rose behind the living room drapes, a child's sob trapped in time, resonating through my bones with uncanny familiarity. I approached the drapes, fingertips grazing the fabric as it pulsed against my touch, as though something on the other side strained to break free. The fabric parted just an inch, revealing a sepia-tinted hallway, endless and deserted, as if I'd stepped into someone's forgotten memory. Cold breath grazed my temple, and I whirled to find empty air, yet the oppressive hush remained, a living thing that refused to dissipate. My phone screen illuminated in my palm, its wallpaper changed to a child's portrait I didn't own, their eyes pleading in pixelated sorrow. I dared to whisper into the void, "Who are you?" The silence that answered felt like a vow, binding me to voices I could never truly silence. The wallpaper peeled at a seam, revealing layers of old family photos, their eyes scratched out, as if someone erased every memory etched on these walls. I pressed my ear to the exposed plaster. Faint voices crackled like static, calling out names I didn't recognize but felt compelled to answer. The air quivered as a low chant threaded through the flat, syllables half-formed and ancient, slipping from mouths unseen and curling around me. A solitary chair faced the window, its back swaying gently though there was no breeze, an invitation or a threat I couldn't decipher. I reached out to still the chair, fingertips grazing its cold wood, and a tremor pulsed up my arm, alive with residual fear. An unexpected roar of static burst from the radio, tuning itself to a frequency of sorrow, voices entwined in ghostly harmony. I stumbled back, my phone lights flickering, revealing scratches forming letters on the floor. "Come," our voices made manifest. The walls groaned as the room contracted, boundaries melting into shadow, reality warping around the epicenter of those vanished voices. My reflection fractured across shards of broken glass, each fragment mouthing pieces of my name in a chorus of dread. I stood alone in the hush as the clock struck 2:14 a.m., its chime swallowed by silence, the promise of answers forever out of reach. The overhead lamp quivered, flickering like dying eyes, its pale glow revealing crawling shadows that writhed across the ceiling in a silent dance macabre. I noticed the fridge door ajar, its cold interior empty and spotless. Yet I recalled placing leftovers there hours ago, now vanished without trace. Soft, metallic clinks sounded from the closet, hangers shifting as if someone moved within the shadows among my clothes. My phone buzzed suddenly. The screen showed an incoming call from unknown, but when I answered, only hollow silence met my trembling voice. I glanced at the mirror. My reflection smiled back, though I hadn't moved, its lips curling into a grin edged with malice. Condensation traced words on the windowpane, "Help me," scrawled in dripping letters before vanishing under my shaking fingertips. The Persian rug beneath my feet seemed to ripple, threads undulating like the surface of a dark sea churned by unseen currents. A bedside lamp blinked out, plunging the room into pitch black, where tiny pinpricks of distant streetlights felt miles away. A breath tickled my ear, warm and urgent, a whisper too soft to understand but clear in intent. "You are not alone." The clock hands blurred as time stuttered, seconds looping around 2:13 a.m., trapping me in an endless moment of haunting stillness. The walls in the hallway seemed to pulsate, each breath like hollow lungs exhaling sorrow, making the floorboards vibrate under my trembling steps. I shone my phone light down a cracked vent, revealing slender fingers curling around rusted edges, then vanishing the instant I flicked the beam. Distant sobs morphed into a lullaby, notes lilting with tragic warmth, beckoning me toward a room that shouldn't exist on my floor plan. The door at the end opened silently, its knobs turning of their own accord, unveiling a corridor I'd never walked, lined with empty frames. I felt a breath on my nape, an ancient lullaby humming through the plaster, pressing me forward as if guided by unseen fingertips. My flashlight flickered, revealing ornate keyholes embedded in the walls, each carved with names I couldn't read, yet recognized in dread. A hollow knock repeated from behind a locked door, echoing with my own heartbeat, until I could no longer tell which sound was real. The lock clicked open, though I never touched it, spilling a dim light that revealed a child's footprints trailing into darkness. Each step I followed the prints, feeling the floor tilt beneath me, as if gravity itself bent to carry me deeper into the void. At the corridor's end, a mirror faced me, fogged with breath that spelled my name before clearing to show two hollow eyes staring back. A low ripple passed through the glass table, its surface distorting reflections into elongated shapes that stretched toward me like desperate hands. Suddenly, the chandelier overhead swayed, though no breeze existed, its crystals chiming a soft lament that trembled through the empty air. My footsteps echoed as I descended into the basement door, its wood splintering under each step, revealing a corridor soaked in impossible darkness. A distant drip echoed through the void, each droplet forming ripples on a shallow pool I couldn't see, beckoning me toward unseen waters. I knelt to touch the water, its surface ice-cold, and saw a pale face break through, eyes pleading before vanishing beneath the depths. The walls began to bleed ink-like stains that crawled toward the floor, each drop sighing secrets I could almost understand. I backed away, only to find the exit sealed by swirling shadow tendrils, pulsing as if alive with unseen heartbeat. A distant lull filled the basement, voices humming an old nursery rhyme in a chorus of fading breaths that chilled my bones. As I raised my head, the ceiling dissolved into starless void, revealing distant whispers dancing among invisible constellations. I realized then the voices weren't trapped here. They were beckoning me to join them, a promise of eternity at the stroke of 2:13 a.m. The floor beneath me vibrated with a deep, humming resonance, as if a subterranean chorus of voices throbbed in the shadows below. A door knocker tapped 3 times of its own accord, each metallic rap echoing my name in a cadence both familiar and alien. The paintings lining the corridor flickered like faulty film, tranquil landscapes warping into yawning voids at the blink of an eye. A child's laughter pealed through the air, playful yet menacing, bouncing off walls before dissolving into oppressive silence. The antique telephone on the side table rang with a shrill, static tone, but when I answered, only hollow emptiness greeted me. Clock hands projected onto the wall blurred into jagged shards, each fragment refusing to settle into a sensible hour. I felt feather-light fingertips graze my shoulder, a soft caress from behind. Yet when I spun, only empty air remained. Somewhere down the hall, a door slammed shut with unstoppable force, its echo reverberating like the final word of a sentence. The mirror in the entryway steamed over, fog tracing indecipherable symbols before clearing under my shaking breath. My phone screen flared to life. You watching. Beneath it, my name appeared, letters sculpted from drifting shadows. The wallpaper's floral design rippled again, petals unfurling into skeletal hands that reached silently toward my stilled form. I stumbled backward into the foyer, only to see the front door swing wide open, revealing nothing but an endless void. The piano's final chord struck itself in the empty hall, its echo lingering like a question unanswered and impossible to ignore. My breath caught as the void outside pulsed with faint lights, like distant souls flickering in an unreachable sea of night. A hush fell, heavier than any silence I'd known, pressing in on me until my knees buckled beneath its weight. The clock's glass shattered without sound, its hands spiraling into the void as time itself unraveled around me. I reached out to catch them, fingertips grazing cold metal before my hand passed through empty space. A chorus of vanished voices rose in mournful crescendo, their harmony folding the room in upon itself. I felt myself drifting forward into those voices, drawn beyond the threshold of fear and into an eternal hush. And then, 2:13 a.m. struck again, the cycle unbroken, beckoning you to like and subscribe if you dare to join the chorus.